guys, I'm Jessica and welcome to my channel Not For the Faint Crafted. If you're new, welcome, and if you're not new, welcome back. So today I am doing a day 4 of my Christmas craft special, and that is DIY candles. One thing I do want to mention, which is quite important, is that this was the first time I made these candles before. I've never made candles ever, so I did read up about it and I did research on it, and you have to be extra careful because you are melting wax, and so it is a fire risk as well if you overheat the wax. So you want to make sure you've got like a thermometer, which I'll show you as I go through my tutorial, what I used and so forth. And you want to make sure that you don't step away when you're actually melting the wax, just because, you know, anything can happen. And I was a bit nervous about it, but no, I'm glad everything was fine. So if you do want to recreate any of these crafts today, yeah, just make sure you read about it, and I'll leave some extra tips in the description box below as well. But yeah, without further ado, let's go on to the crafts. So to make your DIY candles, you'll need a bunch of things. You'll need a glass jug and a pan, candle wax, some brown wax dye, Nutella and Marmite jars, a wax thermometer, some fragrance oils suitable for making candles, some candle wicks. You'll also need something to hold the wicks upright, so I just used chip forks, but you can use anything. And you'll also need an electric stove. So firstly, you need to figure out how much wax you need to melt, and so to do this, you want to first pour water into that Nutella jar up to the point you want the candle to go up to, and then once the water's filled up where you're happy, you want to then pour that water into a measuring dish and round it up to the nearest 10 milliliters. So 200 milliliters of water in this case should equate to 160 grams of wax. I did get the calculations wrong though, and I ended up using 180, but I actually needed that in the end. So next I poured the water out of the jug and cleaned this dry, then placed this onto the digital scales, and then I poured 180 grams worth of wax into the jug. So then, with a pan filled with water halfway, I then placed my glass jug into the pan and then turn the stove on so that the water can start to boil and melt the wax. And also, whilst the wax is starting to melt, I then dipped the end of one of the wicks so that it has a bit of that hot wax, and then placed it into the center of that Nutella jar. And again, whilst the wax is melting, you want to then add in your fragrance oils. So I used a blend of chocolate, hazelnut and cinnamon, just to give it that Nutella Christmas scent, and I just used a few drops of this. There is a way to measure this accurately, but I just kind of freestyled this. Next, when the wax was starting to look like it was turning into liquid, I then put in the dye, but I think I went overkill with the dye, where it ended up looking a bit too dark, so use this sparingly. And after you've added your fragrance and the dye and it's the colour you want it to, you then want to pour this wax, whilst it's still in its liquid form, into your Nutella jar, and then hold the wick up again how I used these chip forks, but you can use anything. And once the candle cooled, I tried to avoid that sinkhole shape by pouring some of the remainder brown wax into the candle, but I didn't have enough wax to kind of conceal it. So despite having a bit of a sinkhole and the colour being a bit too dark, I still really love this Nutella jar. It still looks very quirky and still does have that chocolate look to it. But yeah, once it's done, you want to then just snip off using scissors that remainder wick, and your candle should look something like this. So similar to the Nutella jar, you need to figure out how much wax you're going to need for the Marmite candle. So firstly, pour water into your Marmite jar up to the point you want your candle to go, and then next you want to tip that water into your measuring jug and round it up to the nearest 10 milliliters. So again, I had 200 milliliters of water, and when I deduct the 20% from that, I should be left with 160 grams of wax. But again, I got my math wrong and ended up using 180 grams of wax, but that was fine in the end, it wasn't too much. Next, you want to tip the water out of the jug and clean this dry, and then you want to place the jug onto your digital scales again, and then pour the wax into the jug when it reaches up to 180 grams. And once you've done that, you want to then place the jug, which is filled with wax, into your pan, which should have water up to the halfway point. It doesn't need to be boiling yet. And then you need to turn on your electric stove so that that water can start to boil and then slowly melt the wax inside the jar. So whilst the wax was melting, I took a wick and then I dipped this into the melting wax and then placed this into the Marmite jar in the very center, and using some chip forks I used this to hold the wicks in place. And then next, again, whilst the wax was melting and it was close to its liquid form, I then added in a few drops of sandalwood oil fragrance, and I didn't add any dye because I just wanted this to be quite simple. So next, before pouring the hot wax into the Marmite jar, I just let this cool down for a little bit, and then I poured this in because I didn't want the hot wax to loosen the wax that was securing the wick to the very bottom of the Marmite jar. I also added a few more chip forks to hold this in place so that it wouldn't loosen. So when originally pouring the wax into this jar, I only used up to 2/3 of it, and then I let that candle cool down, and then once that had cooled down, I then poured the remainder hot wax, which I had to remelt again, into that jar. There was a sinkhole still at the end of it, but it wasn't so bad as what it looked like before. And then again, I just basically placed those chip forks just around the wick again, just to secure it in place so it doesn't go lopsided. And once this candle had fully cooled down, similar to the Nutella jar, I just cut off the remainder wick using some scissors. And there you have it, your beautiful DIY candles are ready for Christmas. Hey guys, so I hope you like those DIY crafts. If you did, please do give this video a big thumbs up, and if you love it, please do click that subscribe button. Also, as I mentioned earlier at the start of the video, I've created a special playlist which will house all my Christmas crafts in it. So if you want to see any of my previous crafts, or if you want to keep on top of any of my future Christmas crafts, then you can follow that and check that out. I've left it in the description box below. If you want to see what's in store for the next video, I have left a bit of a teaser trailer at the end of this, so do check that out. Anyway, I hope you have an amazing day. See ya, bye!